You think your life is painful because something went wrong. But what if the pain isn't a problem? What if it's a message you've been refusing to hear? Every time you numb it, delay it, or pretend it's temporary, you're stepping further into a quiet kind of death, the death of your own soul. In a society that tells you to stay positive, look on the bright side, and let it go, you've been conditioned to believe that suffering is an error, that when it shows up, your job is to push it away as fast as possible. But Dostoevsky saw it differently. He believed suffering wasn't an obstacle to life. It was the door to becoming human. Now ask yourself, what have you been running from? That question may sting, and it should. Because in your avoidance, in your obsession with comfort and clarity and clean emotions, you've started softening the very blows that were meant to shape you. You silence your anguish with distractions. You shrink your anger into politeness. You translate your existential despair into productivity. But Dostoevsky would call this cowardice in disguise. You are not healing, you are sedating. And the cost? Your courage, your depth, your freedom. He once wrote, "Suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. Not pleasure, not success. Suffering. That means all the darkness you've been trying to escape might be the only thing capable of waking you up." But here's the part no one tells you. Waking up isn't elegant. It doesn't come with incense or clarity or peace. It comes with a scream, an internal collapse, and yet it's the only way forward. Because as long as you treat suffering like a mistake, you will keep editing your humanity until nothing real remains. Look at your own life. Think of the moments that broke you, the heartbreaks, the failures, the betrayals. Were they not also the moments that forced you to see clearly, that burned away the surface-level noise and demanded your attention? Dostoevsky believed that through pain, man finds the truth. Because pain doesn't allow for illusions. It strips you bare. And what's left is something raw, primal, and terrifying, but honest. And isn't that what you claim to want? Here's the secret. Most people don't want truth. They want sedation with the appearance of wisdom. They want comfort packaged as philosophy. But truth requires suffering. Not just encountering it, but entering it, willingly. That's existential courage. Not heroism in the face of danger, but a quiet, daily choice to stop running from your wounds, to look at them, to touch them, to listen to what they're asking of you. Pause here and really ask yourself, how have you been softening your blows through spiritual bypassing that promises transcendence without shadow work, through distractions dressed up as self-care? Now, I'm not saying pain is good, but it is necessary. Just like a body needs fever to kill infection, your mind needs suffering to become aware of itself. You need that crisis. You need that fall, because without it, you remain asleep inside a fragile shell of pleasantries. And one day you wake up wondering why nothing in your life feels real, even though you followed all the rules. And this isn't theoretical. It shows up in your job, where you feel meaningless but stay for the salary. It shows up in your relationships, where you're not truly seen but stay to avoid loneliness. It shows up in how you scroll, how you speak, how you sleep. There's a quiet scream behind your choices, and you've trained yourself not to hear it. But if you're still here, still listening, maybe that scream is starting to rise. Maybe you're tired of pretending it's all okay, and maybe that's the beginning of courage. Now, don't misunderstand. This is not about romanticizing misery. It's about respecting it. Because every time you dishonor your pain by belittling it, avoiding it, or medicating it prematurely, you're dishonoring the part of you that wants to grow. Dostoevsky didn't say suffering guarantees growth, only that it opens the possibility for it. Whether you walk through that door is up to you. And this is where most people fail. They wait for suffering to pass like a storm, never realizing that it's not passing through them. They're the ones drifting past it, refusing to anchor. Courage, in its rawest form, means staying exactly where it hurts, long enough for something sacred to emerge. That's why some of the most fractured people are also the wisest. Not because they escaped their pain, but because they lived inside it until it revealed what the world could not teach. Pain breaks the ego. It forces humility. And in that humility, a new kind of power is born. Not the power to control life, but the power to bear it without illusion. If this is resonating, take a moment. Not to agree, not to share, just to stay here. Most people won't. Most will already be distracted, reaching for comfort, for simplicity. But if you're still watching, still breathing through this, you're already practicing a kind of resistance, a quiet rebellion against the culture of escape. You're choosing to feel what others avoid. And that is the start of transformation. So let's go deeper. Have you noticed how easily people categorize suffering? Good pain, bad pain, noble pain, avoidable pain. But Dostoevsky rejected that kind of hierarchy. For him, all pain was sacred, because all pain had something to teach. He didn't just write about existential dread. He lived through it. He was imprisoned, exiled, almost executed, and yet it was precisely through these sufferings that he became capable of seeing humanity's full depth, the grotesque and the divine, both. That's why you shouldn't run from your worst moments. They are not detours, they are your curriculum, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you begin to reclaim your agency, not by controlling life, but by entering it fully, wounds and all. Remember this, the deepest transformation never comes from pleasure. It comes from devastation, when everything falls apart and you are left with only your breath and your questions. That's when your real identity begins to form, and if you can stay with yourself in that space, without self-pity, without escape, you become unshakable. And while we're here, if this message is striking something inside you, you might want to stay with this channel. Because we explore not how to feel better, but how to see deeper, how to meet life without flinching. Now take a breath, because there's something else you need to hear. You are not broken. You're just unfinished. And suffering is the process by which the unfinished parts of you are carved into form. What feels like destruction is often preparation. What feels like isolation is often initiation. And what feels like the end might be the first honest beginning you've ever had. There's a strange moment that arrives after the worst pain, an eerie silence. Not relief, not joy, just a void. And if you're not prepared for that silence, you'll rush to fill it with whatever distracts you most. A new project, a new person, a new belief. But if you can sit inside that silence, something ancient begins to speak. Dostoevsky believed that man is not only capable of enduring suffering, he needs it to become whole. That inside each wound is a secret message, and the only reason we never hear it is because we're too busy begging for the pain to stop. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to numb it, it stops being your enemy. It becomes your witness. Look around. Most people you meet are hollowed out, not because they lacked dreams, but because they lacked the stomach to suffer for them. They abandoned depth in favor of speed. They chose self-image over self-knowledge. They were so afraid of the dark that they built their lives entirely in artificial light. But artificial light never nourishes you. It flatters you, sure. It makes your reflection look better, softer, cleaner. But it can't reach your roots. And so you live disconnected from yourself, terrified of shadows, yet desperate for meaning. And meaning, Dostoevsky warns, does not exist in the clean places. It lives in the cracks, in the torn places, in the moments when your entire life collapses and you're forced to choose, do I escape again, or do I finally listen? This is the terrifying freedom of being human. You can avoid your suffering forever. No one will stop you, but you'll pay for it with a slow, invisible decay. You'll keep achieving but feeling nothing. loving but never connecting, existing but never belonging. And all the while the world will tell you that you're fine, that you're doing great, that this is just how life is. But it's not. That's just what life becomes when you surrender your suffering to sedation. There's a line in The Brothers Karamazov where Ivan says, "I don't accept this world." He's referring to the unbearable suffering of innocent children, the ugliness of existence, the madness of creation itself. And Dostoevsky doesn't argue with him. He doesn't offer comfort or logic or spiritual cliches. He doesn't say, "It all makes sense in the end." He simply acknowledges that yes, to live honestly is to suffer deeply, and to love in a world like this is to suffer even more. So why do it? Why face it? Because in the confrontation with suffering, you become real. You stop playing roles. You stop needing approval. You stop pretending that comfort is your highest value. And when you do that, something shifts. The world doesn't become easier, but you become unbreakable. Most people want clarity, but clarity is earned. It is the prize for those who do not flee, for those who choose to feel the burn of confusion until it sharpens them. It's not found in a book. It's not gifted through insight. It is carved into you, like scripture, through the experience of not knowing and staying anyway. You must understand, courage is not loud. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look like a speech or a banner or a revolution. Existential courage is invisible. It happens in a dark room at 2 a.m. when you choose not to run, when you sit with the ghost, when you whisper, "Okay, I'll feel this now, and here's something practical." The next time you're spiraling, when you're overwhelmed, aching, tempted to reach for the familiar anesthetic, don't. Sit down, close your eyes. Ask your pain what it wants from you, not how to fix it, not how to make it leave. Just, what are you here to teach me? You might hear nothing. You might cry. You might shake. But that's not failure. That's the beginning of dialogue. And you've been waiting your whole life to finally be in dialogue with yourself. This is not therapy. This is not self-help. This is you becoming dangerous in the most sacred way, because a human being who has befriended their pain cannot be manipulated. They cannot be controlled by fear, approval, rejection, or illusion. They are sovereign. So why is this so rare? Because it's terrifying to live without an escape plan. It's terrifying to admit that nothing outside you will ever fix what's broken inside. But once you do, you are free. And freedom, as Dostoevsky knew, is unbearable to the average person. They don't want it. They say they do. They chase its symbols. But actual freedom, existential freedom, requires the death of all excuses. Dostoevsky didn't write about abstract suffering. He wrote about moral failure, spiritual despair, the grotesque side of love, the terror of knowing yourself too well. And in each of his characters, he exposed what most people work their whole lives to hide, that we are not innocent, and that we are not victims of life, but participants in its horror and its healing. Think about your worst fear. Not snakes or heights or crowds. I mean the deeper fear, the one beneath the others. Maybe it's the fear that you're not strong enough, or that you're too late, or that if you stopped pretending, everyone would leave. Now imagine facing that fear directly. Imagine walking into it like a cathedral, not to defeat it, but to kneel before it and say, "Teach me." That's existential courage. And yes, it will destroy parts of you, but only the false ones. The child in you that needed to be perfect. The mask that kept you likable. The illusion that safety is more important than growth. These things will not survive, but you will, and what remains will be indestructible. You might be thinking, all of this sounds poetic, but how does it change my life? Here's how. When you stop running from pain, you stop outsourcing your peace. You stop needing the world to behave a certain way for you to be okay. You stop negotiating with reality and start relating to it. That makes you trustworthy to yourself. That makes you able to love without clinging, to suffer without collapsing, to speak without needing to be heard. And it's this shift, this internal revolution, that makes you capable of living with purpose, even if the world never gives you a reward for it. Now ask yourself, who would you be if you stopped softening every blow? If you stopped sanitizing your life for others? If you let your scars speak louder than your smiles? Would you be lonelier? Maybe. Would you be misunderstood? Absolutely. But would you finally be honest? Yes. And that is worth more than all the empty applause you've been chasing. If you've made it this far, you're not just listening, you're remembering. Some part of you always knew this. Some part of you has been whispering this truth under the noise, and now you're finally listening. Don't stop, because in the next part, we're going even further, into the fire, into the root, into the moment where suffering becomes sacred and you become more than just a survivor. You've been taught that healing is a destination, a moment where everything finally makes sense, where the pain dissolves and clarity rushes in like sunlight. But Dostoevsky knew better. Healing is not clarity. Healing is contradiction. It's messy. It's recursive. It's full of relapses, regrets, and strange moments of grace that don't even feel like they belong to you. But most of all, healing requires the courage to live with open wounds, to not close them too fast, because sometimes the scab hides more than it protects. Think about how you've been living, polishing your personality, crafting your responses, smiling when you want to scream. You've been editing your emotions so that you remain digestible to others. You've told yourself the lie of progress, that if you're not happy yet, you're doing it wrong, that if you're still hurting, you've failed the journey. But what if the journey was never about reaching peace? What if it's about becoming the kind of person who can carry pain with dignity? This is what Dostoevsky meant by existential courage. Not the courage to fight external battles, but the courage to stay human in a world that demands your conformity, to stay wounded, to stay open, to stay awake even when it burns. That's why you have to stop softening the blow. Stop filtering your sadness into acceptable doses. Stop translating your rage into politeness. Stop turning your grief into content. Let it be raw. Let it be ugly, let it be real, because if you don't feel it fully, you will never be changed by it. Dostoevsky never glorified pain, he revered it, because he understood something that modern life keeps forgetting. Your suffering is not just yours. It's ancestral, it's archetypal. It connects you to every human being who ever lived, and asks the same questions you are now afraid to speak out loud. Why am I here? Why does it hurt so much? And what am I supposed to do with this pain? There are no simple answers. And anyone who tries to sell you one is trying to sell you something else too. What Dostoevsky gave us instead was something